My sister destroyed my marriage while I was recovering from surgery, so I hired a private investigator and exposed her affair with my husband to our entire family, but what I discovered about her past made everything even worse. My 28F world has been turned upside down in the past few months, and I'm still trying to process everything that happened. This involves my husband Eddie, 31M, and my younger sister Megan, 25F. Eddie and I have been married for 4 years. We met in college and always had what I thought was a solid relationship. We bought our first house 2 years ago in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. Eddie works in IT, and I'm a nurse at the local hospital. Megan has always been the golden child in our family. She's the youngest of 3 kids, and our parents Rachel, 55F, and Tom, 58M, have always treated her differently. When we were growing up, Megan got away with everything. If something went missing, it was never her fault. If there was a mess, someone else must have made it. Our older brother Mark, 32M, moved to another state after college and rarely visits, which I now understand better. The trouble started 3 months ago when I had to have emergency gallbladder surgery. The recovery was supposed to take a few weeks, but complications kept me bedridden for almost 6 weeks. I couldn't lift anything heavy, couldn't drive, and needed help with basic household tasks. Eddie took time off work initially, but his boss started pressuring him to return after the first week. That's when our parents suggested Megan come stay with us to help out. She had just finished her marketing degree and was between jobs, so the timing seemed perfect. I was hesitant at first because Megan and I have never been particularly close, but Eddie thought it was a great idea. He said it would take the pressure off him and give me someone to talk to during the day. Megan arrived with 2 large suitcases and immediately took over our guest room. She decorated it with her own photos and plants, making herself completely at home. At first, I was grateful. She cooked meals, did laundry, and kept me company while Eddie was at work. She would sit on my bed and tell me about her college friends and her plans for finding a job in marketing. But things started feeling off after the second week. Megan began wearing my clothes without asking. She would shower using my expensive shampoo and skincare products. When I mentioned it, she laughed and said we were sisters, so what was the big deal? She also started rearranging things in the kitchen and living room, claiming she was just trying to make things more organized for me. Eddie seemed to enjoy having her around more than I expected. He would come home from work and immediately start chatting with Megan about his day. They would cook dinner together while I rested upstairs, and I could hear them laughing and talking. When I joined them for meals, the conversation felt stilted, like I was interrupting something. One evening, about 3 weeks into Megan's stay, I came downstairs to get some water and found them watching a movie together on the couch. They were sitting closer than seemed necessary, and Eddie's arm was stretched along the back of the couch behind Megan. When they saw me, Eddie quickly moved his arm and Megan scooted to the other end of the couch. They both acted like nothing had happened, but the awkwardness in the room was obvious. I started paying closer attention after that. Megan would always offer to bring Eddie his coffee in the morning before he left for work. She would text him throughout the day, supposedly to update him about my condition, but their text conversations seemed longer than necessary. She started doing his laundry along with mine, and I noticed she was handling his clothes with what seemed like extra care, folding everything perfectly. The breaking point came during my 5th week of recovery. I was finally starting to feel better and had begun moving around the house more. One afternoon, I decided to take a nap and went upstairs around 2 p.m. I couldn't sleep, so I came back down an hour later to get some tea. As I approached the kitchen, I heard voices coming from the laundry room. I stopped in the hallway and listened. Megan was talking in a low voice, saying something about how hard it must be for Eddie to deal with everything. Then I heard Eddie's voice, also speaking quietly, saying that he appreciated everything she was doing and that she made everything easier. There was a long pause, and then I heard what sounded like movement, like someone stepping closer to someone else. I walked into the kitchen and called out to ask if anyone wanted tea. They both appeared from the laundry room immediately, but Megan's face was flushed and Eddie looked guilty about something. Megan said she was just helping Eddie fix a problem with the washing machine, but when I looked, the machine was running normally. That evening, Eddie was unusually attentive to me, bringing me dinner in bed and asking multiple times if I needed anything. It felt forced, like he was trying to compensate for something. Megan stayed in her room most of the night, which was unusual because she typically spent her evenings in the living room watching TV. I started feeling like a stranger in my own house. Eddie and Megan had developed inside jokes and shared references that I wasn't part of. They would start conversations and then stop abruptly when I entered the room. Megan began cleaning the house obsessively, reorganizing everything to her preferences and acting like she was doing me a huge favor. The final straw came on a Thursday evening during my 6th week of recovery. I was feeling much better and had suggested that Megan could probably go back to our parents' house soon since I was almost back to normal. Both Eddie and Megan immediately protested, saying I still needed help and that it was too soon for her to leave. Later that night, I woke up around midnight and realized Eddie wasn't in bed. I got up to look for him, thinking maybe he couldn't sleep and was watching TV. I checked the living room and kitchen but didn't find him. Then I noticed that the guest room door was closed, which was unusual because Megan always slept with it slightly open due to anxiety about being in unfamiliar places. I stood in the hallway for a few minutes, listening. I could hear low voices coming from behind the door, and then I heard what was unmistakably Eddie's laugh. My stomach dropped. I went back to our bedroom and pretended to be asleep when Eddie returned about an hour later. He slipped into bed carefully, trying not to wake me. The next morning, I told Megan that I was feeling much better and that she should probably go home that weekend. She looked panicked and said she thought I still needed more help. Eddie agreed with her, saying we shouldn't rush my recovery. But I insisted, and reluctantly, they both agreed that she would leave on Sunday. That's when I decided to look through Eddie's phone. I had never done anything like that before, but something told me I needed to know what was going on. On Saturday morning, while Eddie was in the shower, I checked his messages. What I found made me sick to my stomach. There were dozens of text messages between Eddie and Megan that started just a few days after she arrived. At first, they were innocent enough, but they quickly became more personal. Megan had been sending Eddie photos of herself throughout the day, not inappropriate ones, but selfies and pictures of her cooking or cleaning. Eddie had been responding with compliments about how beautiful she looked and how much he appreciated everything she was doing. The messages escalated from there. Megan wrote about how she had always thought Eddie was too good for me and how she could see that he wasn't happy in our marriage. Eddie responded by saying that Megan understood him in ways that I never had. They talked about how natural it felt to spend time together and how they wished things could be different. The most recent messages were from the night before. After I had gone to bed, they had exchanged messages about how much they were going to miss each other when Megan left. Eddie had written that the past few weeks had been the happiest he'd felt in years. Megan responded that she had been planning to tell him how she felt for a long time, and that my surgery had given her the perfect opportunity. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone. Then I sat on our bed and tried to figure out what to do next. My sister had been planning to seduce my husband, and she had used my medical emergency as her opportunity. Eddie had betrayed me with my own sister while I was recovering from surgery in our own house. I decided not to confront them immediately. Instead, I pretended everything was normal for the rest of Saturday. I helped Megan pack her things and thanked her for everything she had done. She hugged me goodbye on Sunday morning and promised to visit again soon. Eddie drove her to our parents' house, and when he came back, he seemed subdued and distracted. Now it's been a week since Megan left, and I'm trying to decide what to do with the information I have. Eddie has been acting guilty and distant, and he's been texting someone constantly, though he's being more careful about hiding his phone. I'm sure they're still in contact. I haven't told anyone what I discovered because I'm not sure who I can trust. Our parents adore Megan and have always taken her side in any conflict. My brother lives too far away to be of much help. I feel completely alone in this situation. I'm not sure if I should confront Eddie directly, talk to Megan first, or tell our parents what happened. Part of me wants to pretend I never saw those messages and try to save my marriage, but I don't think I can live with this knowledge. I keep thinking about how they were carrying on their emotional affair while I was bedridden and dependent on their help. Has anyone else been in a similar situation? I don't know what my next steps should be. Update 1: I never expected so many people to respond to my original post. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support. A lot has happened since I wrote that first post, and I wanted to update you all on the situation. After I posted originally, I spent about a week gathering more evidence. I knew that just having screenshots of text messages might not be enough, especially since Megan has always been good at twisting situations to make herself look innocent. I needed to be absolutely certain about what was happening before I made any decisions. I started by setting up a Google Voice number and creating a fake social media profile. I used this to contact some of Megan's college friends, pretending to be planning a surprise for her. Through these conversations, I learned some interesting things about my sister's history. Apparently, this wasn't the first time she had pursued someone else's boyfriend or husband. One girl told me about how Megan had systematically destroyed her relationship with her longtime boyfriend during their junior year by constantly texting him and showing up at his apartment with food and homework help. I also decided to check our home security system more carefully. We have cameras at the front and back doors that save footage for 30 days. I went through the recordings from the weeks Megan was staying with us. What I found was disturbing. On multiple occasions, I could see Eddie and Megan standing very close together on our back patio, talking in ways that looked intimate. In one video from late at night, I could clearly see them hugging for much longer than would be appropriate for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Meanwhile, Eddie's behavior was becoming more obvious. He was constantly checking his phone and smiling at messages. He started working late more often, claiming his boss was giving him extra projects. He also began criticizing me in small ways that he never had before, commenting on my cooking, my appearance, and my energy levels. It felt like he was trying to justify something to himself. 2 weeks after my original post, I decided to drive by our parents' house to see if Eddie's car was there. I had told him I was going to visit a friend from work, but instead I parked down the street from my childhood home. Sure enough, Eddie's car was in the driveway. I waited for 2 hours, and when he finally came out, Megan walked him to his car. They stood there talking for several minutes, and then she hugged him goodbye. It wasn't a casual family hug. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and the hug lasted at least 30 seconds. I confronted Eddie that evening when he got home. I told him I knew he had been at our parents' house and asked him why he had lied about working late. He immediately became defensive and accused me of being paranoid and controlling. He said that Megan had called him because she was having trouble with her car, and he had gone over to help her with some mechanical issues. When I pointed out that our father is perfectly capable of helping with car problems, Eddie said that Tom was busy with work and Megan had specifically asked for his help. I knew he was lying, but I didn't reveal that I had seen the text messages yet. Instead, I told him that his behavior had changed since Megan's stay with us, and I was concerned about our relationship. Eddie got angry and said that I was being unreasonable and that my recovery from surgery had made me suspicious of everyone. He said that Megan had been nothing but helpful, and I was being ungrateful and paranoid. The argument escalated, and Eddie ended up sleeping in the guest room that night. The next morning, he apologized and said he was stressed about work and didn't mean to lose his temper. But his explanation about helping Megan with her car still didn't make sense, especially since I knew from the security footage that they had been spending time together regularly. I decided to hire a private investigator. I know that sounds extreme, but I needed to know the full extent of what was happening. The PI I hired specializes in marital investigations and came highly recommended. I gave him all the information I had and asked him to document Eddie and Megan's activities for 2 weeks. The results were devastating. The PI provided me with photos and detailed reports of Eddie and Megan meeting at various locations around town. They were having lunch together at restaurants, meeting at a park near our parents' house, and spending hours at a coffee shop downtown. The photos showed them holding hands, kissing, and acting like a couple. The most damaging evidence was from a hotel parking lot. The PI had followed them there on a Tuesday afternoon when I thought Eddie was at work. He had photos of them going into the hotel together and coming out 3 hours later. In the photos from when they were leaving, they looked relaxed and happy, walking close together with Eddie's arm around Megan's waist. I also discovered that Eddie had been lying about his work schedule. The PI contacted his office and confirmed that Eddie had been taking half-days and long lunch breaks regularly for the past month. His boss had actually been concerned about his performance and had spoken to him about his attendance issues. When I received the PI's report, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot during my lunch break and cried for an hour. My husband of 4 years and my sister had been having a full-blown affair for over a month. They had used my medical emergency and recovery as cover for their relationship, and they had been lying to my face every day. I decided to tell our parents before confronting Eddie and Megan. I drove to their house on a Saturday morning when I knew Megan would be there. I brought printed copies of the PI's photos and his detailed report. When I walked into our parents' living room, Megan was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, watching TV. Our mother was in the kitchen making breakfast, and our father was reading the newspaper. It looked like such a normal family scene, which made what I was about to do feel even worse. I asked everyone to sit down because I had something important to discuss. I started by explaining that I had discovered Eddie and Megan were having an affair. Megan immediately started crying and denying everything, saying I was being crazy and paranoid. Our parents looked confused and concerned. Then I showed them the photos. The evidence was undeniable. There were pictures of Eddie and Megan holding hands, kissing, and entering the hotel together. Megan's denials became more frantic, but the photos spoke for themselves. Our father became furious, not at Megan, but at me for having them followed. He accused me of violating their privacy and said that hiring a PI was an extreme and inappropriate response to marital problems. Our mother started crying and saying that there must be some misunderstanding. But the most shocking reaction came from Megan herself. After about 10 minutes of denying everything, she suddenly stopped crying and looked directly at me. She said that Eddie had told her our marriage had been over for years and that he was planning to divorce me anyway. She claimed that Eddie had said I was cold and unaffectionate and that he had never really been happy with me. She went on to say that she and Eddie had a real connection and that they understood each other in ways that he and I never could. She said that Eddie had confided in her about how lonely he felt in our marriage and how he had been thinking about leaving me long before my surgery. Our parents sat in stunned silence as Megan continued talking. She said that she wasn't going to apologize for finding happiness with someone who truly appreciated her. She claimed that Eddie had been the one to initiate their relationship and that she had tried to resist at first, but their feelings for each other were too strong. I realized in that moment that this version of my sister was someone I had never seen before. The sweet, innocent younger sister I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who could justify betraying her own family without any remorse. Our parents didn't know what to say. Our mother kept crying and saying she couldn't believe this was happening. Our father seemed more concerned about the family's reputation than about the actual betrayal. Neither of them defended me or condemned Megan's actions. I left their house and drove home to wait for Eddie. I had decided that I was going to confront him with everything I knew and tell him that I wanted a divorce. I was done trying to save a marriage that he had already destroyed. Update 2: The confrontation with Eddie didn't go at all the way I expected, and what happened next has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my family. When Eddie came home that Saturday evening after I had shown the evidence to my parents, he walked into the house like nothing had happened. I was sitting at our kitchen table with all the pie photos spread out in front of me. When he saw them, his face went completely white. I told him I knew everything and that I wanted him to leave. Eddie stood there for a long time just staring at the photos. Then he sat down across from me and started talking. What he told me changed everything. According to Eddie, the affair hadn't started the way I thought. He claimed that Megan had been calling and texting him for months before my surgery, usually when she knew I wouldn't be around. She would ask him questions about our relationship and make comments about how I didn't seem to appreciate him enough. He said he initially thought she was just being a concerned sister, but her messages gradually became more personal and flirtatious. Eddie admitted that he should have told me about Megan's behavior, but he said he didn't want to cause problems between me and my family. He knew how difficult my relationship with my parents could be, and he didn't want to make things worse by complaining about their favorite daughter. When my surgery was scheduled, Eddie said Megan immediately volunteered to come stay with us. She told our parents that she was worried about my recovery and wanted to help, but she had been texting Eddie privately about how this would be a good opportunity for them to spend more time together. Eddie claimed that he tried to keep things appropriate while Megan was staying with us, but she was constantly finding reasons to be alone with him. She would wait until I was napping or resting to start conversations about how unhappy she thought I seemed and how she could see that Eddie deserved someone who appreciated him more. According to Eddie, Megan was the one who initiated their first kiss. He said it happened in the laundry room that day I had heard them talking. Megan had cornered him and told him she had been in love with him since the first time she met him. Eddie admitted that he didn't stop her when she kissed him, and that's when their physical affair began. Eddie swore that he never told Megan our marriage was over or that he was planning to leave me. He said those were lies she made up to justify her actions to my parents. He claimed that he had been confused and flattered by her attention, especially during a stressful time when I was recovering and our house felt chaotic. I asked Eddie why he continued the affair after Megan left our house if he really wanted to save our marriage. He said that Megan had threatened to tell me that he had seduced her if he tried to end things. She had also threatened to tell our parents that Eddie had taken advantage of her while she was staying in our home to help with my recovery. Eddie showed me text messages from Megan that supported his version of events. In these messages, Megan was clearly the one pursuing the relationship and making plans for them to meet. There were also messages where she talked about how she had always wanted Eddie for herself and how she deserved to be happy even if it hurt me. But the most disturbing messages were the ones where Megan discussed her long-term plans. She had written to Eddie about how she thought they should wait until after the holidays to tell everyone about their relationship, giving people time to get used to the idea. She had also sent him messages about how she thought they should handle dividing our assets and whether Eddie thought I would be willing to let them have the house. Eddie told me he had started to realize that Megan had been planning this situation for much longer than he initially understood. He said that some of her comments during her stay at our house made more sense now, like when she had mentioned that our guest room would make a perfect office space, or when she had suggested changes to our kitchen layout. I didn't know whether to believe Eddie's version of events. On one hand, the text messages he showed me did support his story. On the other hand, he had still participated in the affair and lied to me for weeks. I told him I needed time to think and asked him to stay somewhere else while I decided what I wanted to do. Eddie went to stay with his brother, and I spent the next week going through our entire relationship in my mind. I realized there had been signs of Megan's inappropriate interest in Eddie that I had missed or dismissed. She always insisted on sitting next to him at family dinners. She would find excuses to touch him when she talked, putting her hand on his arm or shoulder. She always asked detailed questions about his work and his interests, more than seemed normal for a sister-in-law. I also remembered times when Megan had made subtle comments about our relationship that I had thought were just sisterly concern. She would ask if Eddie and I were happy, or mention that she thought Eddie seemed stressed. She had also made several comments over the years about how she thought Eddie was too good for me, which I had interpreted as compliments but now seemed more sinister. While Eddie was staying with his brother, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I contacted Megan's college roommate, whose name I found on some old social media posts. What this woman told me was disturbing. According to her roommate, Megan had a pattern of becoming obsessed with other people's boyfriends. She would study their relationships, learn about their interests, and then find ways to insert herself into their lives. The roommate told me about at least 3 different instances where Megan had successfully broken up couples by convincing the man that his girlfriend didn't appreciate him enough. The roommate also told me that Megan had specifically mentioned me and Eddie during college. She had shown her roommate photos of Eddie and talked about how she thought he was perfect for her instead of for me. The roommate said she had always found Megan's comments about my relationship creepy, but she hadn't known how to address it at the time. I also learned that Megan had been asking our parents questions about my marriage for years. She would bring up concerns about whether Eddie seemed happy, or mention that she thought I took him for granted. Our parents had dismissed these comments as Megan being a caring sister, but now I could see that she had been planting seeds of doubt about my relationship for a long time. Armed with this new information, I decided to confront Megan directly. I drove to our parents' house on a Thursday evening when I knew she would be home. When I arrived, Megan was in her old bedroom, which she had been living in since leaving our house. I told Megan that I knew about her pattern of targeting other people's relationships and that I had spoken to her college roommate. Megan initially tried to deny everything, but when I showed her the text messages Eddie had shared with me, her entire demeanor changed. Megan stopped pretending to be the innocent victim and became aggressive and defensive. She told me that she had never understood what Eddie saw in me and that she had always known she would be better for him. She said that Eddie had been unhappy in our marriage for years, and she had just given him the courage to admit it. Most shockingly, Megan admitted that she had been planning to pursue Eddie for a long time. She said my surgery had been the perfect opportunity, but she would have found another way eventually. She claimed that Eddie had feelings for her that he had been suppressing, and she had just helped him realize what he really wanted. Our parents walked in during this conversation and heard Megan's confessions. Our father immediately started making excuses for her behavior, saying that she was young and had made a mistake. Our mother began crying again and begging both of us to find a way to work things out as a family. But I was done trying to preserve family relationships that had never been healthy to begin with. I told my parents that Megan had deliberately targeted my marriage and that Eddie and I were getting divorced because of her actions. I said that I wouldn't be attending any family events or gatherings where Megan would be present. Our father became angry with me for making ultimatums and said that I was being dramatic. Our mother accused me of trying to split up the family over a mistake that could be forgiven. Neither of them seemed to understand that this wasn't just a mistake or a moment of poor judgment, but a calculated campaign to destroy my marriage. I left my parents' house that night knowing that my relationship with my family was probably over. Megan had not only taken my husband, but she had also cost me my parents and my sense of belonging in my own family. Update 3: I'm writing this final update because several people have asked me what happened with the divorce and my family situation. The past 2 months have been difficult, but I wanted to share how everything concluded. Eddie and I went through with the divorce. Despite his claims that Megan had manipulated him, I couldn't get past the fact that he had betrayed me during one of the most vulnerable times in my life. Our divorce was finalized last week, and Eddie has already moved in with Megan at our parents' house. Our father helped him move his belongings out of our house while I was at work, which I found cowardly but not surprising. The property division was straightforward since we had been married for less than 5 years and didn't have children. I kept the house because I could afford the mortgage payments on my own, and Eddie took most of our savings. He also took responsibility for his student loans and credit card debt. What surprised me was how quickly Eddie and Megan's relationship fell apart once they didn't have to sneak around anymore. According to my brother Mark, who still talks to our parents occasionally, Eddie and Megan have been fighting constantly since he moved into our parents' house. Apparently, the reality of their situation is much different from the fantasy they had created during their affair. Megan expected Eddie to be grateful and romantic, but instead he seems resentful about how the situation unfolded. Eddie apparently blames Megan for pushing him into a relationship he wasn't ready for and for destroying his marriage before he had decided what he really wanted. Megan, on the other hand, expected Eddie to be completely devoted to her, but he's been withdrawn and moody since moving in. Our parents are struggling with having both Eddie and Megan living in their house. Our father has been complaining to Mark about the tension and drama, and our mother is exhausted from trying to keep the peace. What they thought would be a temporary arrangement until Eddie and Megan found their own place has stretched on for weeks with no end in sight. I've maintained no contact with Megan and our parents, and limited contact with Eddie only when necessary for divorce paperwork. Eddie has tried to reach out several times, claiming he wants to apologize and explain his actions, but I haven't responded to his messages. I've also blocked Megan on all social media and changed my phone number. The most difficult part has been losing my relationship with our parents. Our mother calls my new number occasionally, but I don't answer. She leaves voicemails asking me to come home for dinner or to please call her back, but I'm not ready to have that conversation. Our father hasn't attempted to contact me at all, which hurts but doesn't surprise me. I've been focusing on rebuilding my life and career. The hospital where I work has been supportive throughout this whole situation, and my supervisor even helped me switch to a different shift so I wouldn't have to worry about running into Eddie at times when he might be picking up Megan from somewhere. I've also been working on strengthening my relationship with Mark. He and his wife Jessica have been incredibly supportive, and they've invited me to visit them for the holidays. Mark admitted that he moved across the country partly to get away from our family's dysfunction, and he's been helpful in validating my decision to cut contact with our parents and Megan. Through Mark, I learned that Megan lost the marketing job she had finally gotten. Apparently, her employer found out about her involvement in breaking up my marriage through mutual acquaintances, and they decided she wasn't a good fit for their company culture. Our parents are now supporting her financially while she looks for new employment. I've also learned that several of our extended family members have chosen sides in this situation. Most of our aunts and uncles have been supportive of me, especially after learning the details of what happened. Our grandmother on our mother's side has been particularly vocal about her disappointment in Megan's behavior and our parents' response to the situation. The house feels peaceful now that all traces of Eddie are gone. I've redecorated several rooms and turned Eddie's office into a reading room for myself. I've also started inviting friends over more often, which is something I rarely did when Eddie and I were married. I'm not sure if I'll ever be ready to reconcile with our parents or Megan. The betrayal feels too deep, and their response to the situation showed me how little they value me compared to Megan. Our father's immediate defense of Megan and our mother's attempts to minimize what happened made it clear that they will always prioritize Megan's comfort over my well-being. Some people have suggested that I should consider forgiveness for my own peace of mind, but I'm not ready for that yet. Right now, I'm focused on building a life that doesn't revolve around trying to earn approval from people who have never really valued me. I've been dating someone new for the past month. His name is David, and he's a teacher I met through a friend from work. He knows about my divorce and family situation, and he's been patient and understanding about my trust issues. It's nice to be with someone who appreciates me without any games or manipulation. Looking back, I can see that my marriage to Eddie probably wouldn't have lasted even without Megan's interference. We had grown apart over the years, and neither of us had been putting effort into maintaining our connection. But I'll always resent the way it ended and the role my own sister played in destroying what we had built together. I don't regret hiring the private investigator or confronting everyone with the evidence I gathered. Some people might think it was extreme, but I needed to know the truth and I needed proof that couldn't be denied or twisted. Without that evidence, Megan would have continued to play the victim and our parents would have continued to make excuses for her behavior. I'm sharing this story because I want other people who might be in similar situations to know that they're not crazy for suspecting betrayal, even when it involves family members. Trust your instincts and don't let people convince you that you're being paranoid when something feels wrong. I also want people to understand that cutting contact with toxic family members is sometimes the healthiest choice, even when it's difficult and lonely. I'd rather be alone than spend my life trying to earn love and respect from people who will never give it to me. That's where things stand now. I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm finally starting to feel hopeful about the future. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My alcoholic cousin destroyed my sister's wedding, so I called the police. Then we found out he wasn't even our real cousin and our grandparents had been lying to us for 30 years. I, 28M, never had a good relationship with my cousin Harry, 31M. Our history goes back to when we were kids. Harry lost both his parents in a terrible car crash when he was 5 years old. I was only 2 at the time, so I don't remember much about his parents, but my mom told me they were driving home from a party when their car slid off an icy road. Harry was at our grandparents' house that night, which probably saved his life. After the accident, my grandparents took Harry in and raised him as their own. At first, everyone thought this was the best solution. Harry would stay with family who loved him, and my grandparents, who had just retired, could give him their full attention. What no one expected was how this would change our family dynamics forever. From the moment Harry moved in, my grandparents treated him differently from me and my sister Shania, 25F. I guess they felt guilty about his parents' death or wanted to compensate for his loss, but it went way beyond normal grandparental love. Every birthday, Harry would get expensive gifts like gaming consoles or bikes, while Shania and I got cheap toys or clothes from discount stores. During Christmas, the pile of presents under the tree for Harry was always 3 times bigger than ours combined. The preferential treatment didn't stop at gifts. Harry could do no wrong in my grandparents' eyes. When we were in elementary school, Harry would often steal my toys or break them on purpose. If I complained, my grandparents would say I was being selfish and should learn to share with my less fortunate cousin. When Harry started fights with other kids at school, my grandparents would defend him, saying he was just working through his trauma. Meanwhile, if I got into any trouble, even minor things like being late to class, I was lectured about responsibility and setting a good example. Harry's behavior got worse as we entered our teens. He started drinking at 14, stealing alcohol from my grandparents' liquor cabinet. Instead of addressing the problem, they would just quietly replace the bottles and pretend nothing happened. By 16, he was regularly showing up drunk to family events. I remember one Thanksgiving when he threw up all over the dinner table and ruined the entire meal. My grandparents just cleaned it up and served him soup in his room, while telling everyone else to be understanding because he's been through so much. The real problem started when we hit college age. My grandparents had set up college funds for all 3 of us, me, Harry, and Shania. But by the time I graduated high school, they had spent most of my fund and all of Shania's on bailing Harry out of various troubles, paying for his wrecked cars, covering bounced checks, and hiring lawyers when he got caught drunk driving. They told us we could take student loans since we had 2 parents to help us, while poor Harry only had them. Shania and I ended up with massive student debt while Harry got a free ride to college. Despite having everything handed to him, Harry dropped out after 2 years. He claimed college was too stressful and he needed to find himself. My grandparents supported this decision and even gave him money to explore his options. He used this money to party and drift between dead-end jobs, never keeping one for more than a few months. Last year, my sister Shania got engaged to her boyfriend Tom, 27M. Tom comes from a good family and has a successful career in software development. Shania works as a pediatric nurse, and they saved for over a year to have their dream beach wedding. They planned everything carefully, wanting it to be perfect. A week before the wedding, Harry suddenly showed up at my grandparents' house. He claimed he had been sober for 3 months and wanted to make amends with the family. He gave this whole speech about how he had hit rock bottom and realized he needed to change. He even showed my grandparents an AA chip, though I later found out he bought it online. My grandparents ate it up completely. They started pressuring Shania to invite Harry to the wedding, saying it would be good for his recovery. Shania was really hesitant. The last family event Harry attended was our cousin Sarah's graduation party, where he hit on Sarah's 17-year-old friends and tried to fight her dad when he was asked to leave. But my grandparents played their trump card. They told Shania they wouldn't attend her wedding if Harry wasn't invited. They said she was being cruel and unforgiving, and that family should always stick together. Shania was heartbroken. She had always been close to our grandparents and wanted them at her wedding. After days of guilt tripping and emotional manipulation, she finally gave in and invited Harry. The wedding ceremony itself went okay, probably because Harry didn't have access to alcohol until the reception. But once the bar opened, things went downhill fast. During the father-daughter dance, I noticed Harry making multiple trips to the bar. By the time the speeches started, he was visibly drunk. When Tom's best man was halfway through his speech, Harry stumbled to the front and grabbed the microphone. What followed was a complete disaster. Harry started rambling about how Shania was always jealous of him growing up, how she would cry to our grandparents about the gifts he got. He accused her of marrying Tom for his money, saying she was just a gold digger like her mom. When Tom's father tried to intervene and take the microphone, Harry sucker punched him, breaking his glasses and giving him a bloody nose. The entire reception erupted into chaos. Harry started grabbing bottles from the bar and throwing them at guests. He knocked over the wedding cake, destroying the top tier that Shania and Tom were saving. When Shania started crying, Harry told her to stop being dramatic and tried to push her into the pool, saying she needed to cool off. If Tom hadn't caught her, she would have fallen in and ruined her dress. The wedding venue's security tried to contain him, but Harry was out of control. He was throwing chairs, breaking centerpieces, and screaming about how everyone had always been against him. My grandparents were trying to calm him down, telling everyone he was just having a bad day and needed understanding. That's when I'd had enough. While they were distracted, I went outside and called the police. When the police arrived, Harry completely lost it. He tried to run, then fought with the officers when they caught him. He ended up elbowing one officer in the face and kicking another in the shin. They had to physically restrain him to get him into the police car. My grandparents were hysterical. They blamed me for escalating the situation, saying I should have let them handle it within the family like we always had. They followed Harry to the station and got him a lawyer before they even checked if Shania was okay. Now Harry is facing multiple charges: assault, destruction of property, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. The family is completely split. My grandparents haven't spoken to me since that night. They're spending their retirement savings on Harry's legal defense and telling everyone who will listen that I betrayed the family. Some relatives agree that Harry needed to face consequences, while others think I went too far by involving the police. Even Shania, whose wedding was completely ruined, says that while she's angry with Harry, she feels guilty about him potentially going to jail. I feel like I finally did what everyone should have done years ago: hold Harry accountable for his actions. But seeing my family torn apart makes me wonder if I made the right choice. AITA? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Reading your responses helped me feel less crazy about my decision to call the police on Harry. A lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, and things have gotten much more complicated than I ever expected. Harry got out on bail 3 days after the wedding incident. My grandparents mortgaged their house to pay his bail and hire some hotshot defense attorney who specializes in cases involving addiction and mental health. They didn't even tell my parents they were doing this. We found out when the bank called my dad to verify some information since he was listed as their emergency contact. The night Harry got out, around 2 a.m., I woke up to someone pounding on my front door and screaming my name. I live alone in a small house I recently bought, and my first instinct was to call the police. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw Harry swaying on my porch, clearly drunk out of his mind. He was holding a half-empty bottle of whiskey and looked like he hadn't showered since getting out of jail. I told him through the door to leave or I'd call the police. This set him off completely. He started screaming about how I ruined his life, how I was always jealous of him, and how I turned the family against him. Then his threats got really scary. He said he was going to burn my house down while I slept, that he would make me regret ever being born. The worst part was when he said he knew my work schedule and would be watching me. I recorded everything on my phone while quietly calling 911. The police arrived within minutes and arrested Harry for violating his bail conditions. My neighbors had come outside by then, and several of them gave statements about his behavior. One neighbor even had security camera footage of Harry urinating on my car before he started banging on my door. The next day, my mom came over to check on me. She was really shaken up by everything and suggested we look through some old family photos to calm down, something we used to do when I was little and had a bad day. We were going through boxes in my spare room when we found something strange. In one of my grandma's old photo albums from before Harry's parents died, there was an envelope stuffed with legal documents. At first, we thought they were just old bills or insurance papers, but as we read through them, we discovered something shocking. The documents were adoption papers from when Harry was born, not from when his parents died. According to these papers, Harry's parents who died in the car crash weren't his biological parents at all. They were friends of my grandparents who took him in as a baby. His real mother was a teenager who couldn't keep him, and my grandparents arranged the whole thing through some private adoption agency. The papers showed that my grandparents actually financed the adoption and had some kind of guardianship agreement from the start. This explains so much about why my grandparents always favored Harry. They weren't just trying to make up for his parents' death, they felt responsible for his entire life. They had basically chosen him over their own grandchildren before we were even born. My mom was stunned. She had no idea about any of this, which meant my grandparents had kept this secret from everyone, including their own children, for over 30 years. We debated what to do with this information for hours. Part of me wanted to expose everything right away, but my mom suggested we talk to my grandparents first. When we confronted them with the documents, my grandmother burst into tears while my grandfather got angry and defensive. They finally told us the whole story. Harry's biological mother was actually my grandfather's niece, his sister's daughter. She got pregnant at 16 and begged them for help. Instead of supporting her as a single mother, they convinced her to give the baby up for adoption and arranged for their friends to adopt him. They swore the friends to secrecy and set up a trust fund for Harry. When Harry's adoptive parents died in the car crash, my grandparents saw it as their chance to finally raise him themselves. They admitted that their guilt over separating him from his birth mother made them overcompensate by giving him everything he wanted. They never told anyone because they were afraid it would disturb the family peace. I was disgusted by their secret keeping, but what really got me was their reaction when I suggested telling Harry the truth. They begged me not to tell him, saying it would destroy his fragile mental state and ruin his defense in court. They even offered to sign their house over to me if I kept quiet. When I refused to be bought off, they threatened to tell everyone that I was lying and trying to extort them. My sister Shania thinks Harry deserves to know the truth, especially since his biological mother is still alive, though my grandparents refuse to tell us where she is. Our parents are torn. They're angry about being lied to all these years, but they're worried that revealing everything now might push Harry over the edge. Harry's court date is next month. His lawyer is pushing for a plea deal, claiming that Harry's actions at the wedding were caused by the trauma of losing his parents. My grandparents are supporting this narrative, telling everyone how Harry has suffered so much loss in his life. Meanwhile, they're pressuring all the family members to write letters to the judge about what a good person Harry is deep down. I feel sick watching them continue to enable Harry's behavior with more lies. The truth about his adoption doesn't excuse any of his actions, but I believe he has a right to know who he really is. But is it wrong to tell him while he's facing criminal charges? Should I wait until after the trial? Or should I tell his lawyer so they can't use the orphan trauma defense? I'll update again after I decide what to do. Right now, I'm just trying to process everything while dealing with the fact that my entire childhood was basically built on a lie. Update 2. After much thought and discussion with Shania, I decided Harry needed to know the truth about his adoption. I couldn't stand watching my grandparents use his orphan trauma as an excuse for his behavior, especially when it was all based on lies they created. I arranged to visit Harry in jail, though my grandparents tried everything to stop me. They called the jail pretending to be my father, saying I wasn't allowed to visit. When that didn't work, they told Harry I was coming to mock him about his charges. Despite their interference, I managed to see him last week. Harry looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and his hands were shaking from alcohol withdrawal. At first, he just glared at me through the visiting room glass. I didn't waste time with small talk. I showed him copies of all the documents we found. The adoption papers, the legal agreements, everything. I even had a photo of his biological mother from when she was young, which I found hidden in another of my grandmother's albums. His reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of being angry at our grandparents for lying, he completely twisted the situation. He started laughing, this weird, hollow laugh that gave me chills. Then he said this proved what he'd always known, that he was special and chosen while Shania and I were just born into the family by accident. He said our grandparents picked him because they knew he was better than us, and we'd spent our whole lives trying to steal their love from him. When I tried to explain that his biological mother was actually family and might want to know him, he became enraged. He slammed his fists against the glass and screamed that I was making up lies because I was jealous. The guards had to remove him from the visiting area. 2 days later, Harry's lawyer contacted our family. Harry told him about the adoption documents and created this whole new defense strategy. He's now claiming that learning about his adoption triggered a mental breakdown, which is what caused his behavior at the wedding. His lawyer is arguing that Harry has been suffering from severe emotional and psychological trauma his entire life without knowing why, and that's what led to his addiction issues. My grandparents are fully supporting this new strategy. They wrote long statements about how guilty they feel for keeping the truth from him, and how they can see now that their secret damaged his mental health. They even got some psychiatrists to evaluate Harry and diagnose him with various trauma-related conditions. The worst part is, it might actually work. The prosecutor offered Harry a really generous plea deal, 6 months in a private rehab facility followed by 3 years of probation. No jail time at all. The only condition is that the whole family needs to write letters to the judge supporting Harry's rehabilitation plan. My grandparents are going all out to make this happen. They've already written their letters, painting Harry as a victim of circumstances who just needs help and understanding. They're pushing everyone in the family to do the same. They even mortgaged their vacation house to pay for the fancy rehab facility they want to send him to. Shania is considering writing a letter. She says that while she's still upset about her wedding, she feels partially responsible because she invited Harry despite knowing his problems. Tom is furious about this. He's still angry about his father getting punched and doesn't want Shania involved at all. My parents are also divided. My mom thinks Harry needs serious help and rehab might be better than jail. But my dad says Harry has manipulated the family for the last time and needs to face real consequences. They've been arguing about it constantly. Meanwhile, my grandparents have taken their manipulation to a new level. Last week, they updated their will. They told the whole family that anyone who doesn't support Harry's rehabilitation plan will be disinherited. They're using my grandfather's heart condition to guilt everyone, saying the stress of Harry going to jail could kill him. The final straw came yesterday. Harry's lawyer sent me a letter threatening to sue me for maliciously revealing private adoption information if I don't write a letter supporting Harry. The lawyer claims I caused Harry severe emotional distress by telling him about his adoption without proper psychological support present. I'm standing firm in my decision not to help with Harry's defense. He assaulted multiple people, destroyed property, and threatened me at my house. Finding out he was adopted doesn't change any of that. But now I'm worried about potential legal trouble for myself, and the family pressure is getting worse every day. The judge will make a decision about Harry's plea deal next week. I'll update again once we know what's going to happen. Update 3. I know it's been a while since my last update, but a lot has happened and I needed time to process everything. The judge accepted Harry's plea deal. He went to a luxury rehab facility that cost my grandparents nearly $50,000 per month. For 3 months, everything seemed to be going well. Harry was attending therapy sessions, participating in AA meetings, and even started helping out with group sessions for other patients. My grandparents visited him every week and came back with glowing reports about his progress. They kept pushing me and Shania to visit him, saying he was like a completely different person. Even some of our cousins who visited said he seemed genuinely changed. They said he was working out regularly, reading self-help books, and talking about wanting to make amends with everyone he had hurt. Shania eventually gave in and visited him in month 2. She said he cried and apologized for ruining her wedding, promised to pay for a vow renewal ceremony, and even wrote a letter of apology to Tom's father. I still refused to see him, which made my grandparents increase their pressure on me. They said I was being stubborn and preventing the family from healing. Then, last month, Harry completed his rehab program. He moved in with my grandparents since one of his bail conditions was having a stable residence. He got a job at a local warehouse and started attending daily AA meetings. My grandparents were ecstatic, telling everyone this was the fresh start Harry needed. Everything fell apart last week. Tom and Shania were woken up at 3 a.m. by their security system. When they checked their cameras, they saw Harry in their driveway, slashing their car tires. Tom called the police while Shania called our grandparents. By the time anyone arrived, Harry had not only destroyed all 4 tires but had also spray-painted "Gold Digging Bitch" on the side of Shania's car and "Family Traitor" on their garage door. The police found Harry passed out in his car 2 blocks away with empty vodka bottles and a bag of pills. When they arrested him, he was screaming about how Shania and I had stolen his inheritance. Apparently, he had overheard our grandparents discussing changing their will back to include all grandchildren equally since he seemed to be doing better. This sent him into a rage. But here's the worst part, we discovered that Harry had been planning this for weeks. The police found a notebook in his car filled with disturbing writings about getting revenge on the family. He had detailed plans to burn down both my house and Shania's, lists of our daily schedules, and information about our workplaces. He'd even taken photos of Shania's house and drawn X's over all the windows. My grandparents are still defending him. They claim the stress of maintaining sobriety triggered a relapse and that we should give him another chance. They've already contacted his lawyer about getting him into another rehab program instead of jail. They're even trying to blame Tom for calling the police instead of handling it within the family. I've had enough. I've blocked my grandparents' numbers and told my lawyer to send them a cease and desist letter if they try to contact me. Shania and Tom are moving to another city for a fresh start. They're not telling anyone in the family their new address except our parents. Some relatives are calling us heartless, saying family should always forgive. But after finding those revenge plans, I can't risk having Harry in my life anymore. Maybe he'll get help and truly change someday, but I won't be around to find out. My parents understand my decision, though they're sad about the family being torn apart. Harry is back in jail awaiting a hearing for violating his probation. This time, I hope he faces real consequences for his actions. As for me, I'm looking forward to building a life without the constant drama and manipulation. Sometimes cutting ties is the only way to find peace.